Welcome to Saturday Morning Spider-Man. This is where we're going over the Ultimate Spider-Man storylines to eventually bring you a conclusion so that you understand exactly where Tom Holland got his ideas to become Spider-Man. That and Marvel hired him and gave him a bunch of money to probably do it. I mean, that's most likely what ended up happening. But anyway, I like to think that it's because he really enjoyed the Ultimate Spider-Man storyline, and today we're going to be covering Volume 19, The Death of the Green Goblin. Now to catch you up on what we've skipped over, Peter Parker is back with Mary Jane, and Kitty Pryde was kicked out of the X-Men and now goes to the school that Peter Parker and Mary Jane are at. Nick Fury is also gone, and Carol Danvers is now the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. Also, Harry became a Goblin himself. Now aboard the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, acting director Carol Danvers walks down to a cell asking, what exactly does he want? And the soldier with her tells her that he wants to talk to Nick Fury. Carol says that Nick isn't here. Can't one of them just put on an eye patch or something and pretend that they are Nick? And the soldier tells her that he's pretty sure that they'll see through that, and Carol says fine, open it up. Inside the holding cell, Norman Osborn asks, who are you? And Carol says that she is Captain Carol Danvers. What can she do for him? Norman tells her that he wants to talk to Nick Fury. And Carol says that he's not here. She is. So what does he want? Norman pauses for a moment and then he says, I'm ready to make my deal. Fury offered me a deal with some privileges in return for my scientific cooperation. Carol asks exactly what are these privileges that you speak of? And Norman says, I want to see my son. I'm willing to play ball and make a deal, so... Carol tells him, yeah, I'm gonna have to pass on that one. Norman scoffs, telling her, just get me Fury. And Carol tells him that you may have missed the part of the conversation where I said that he wasn't here. And Norman shouts, I'm ready to make my deal. This is a complete waste of time just sitting here. And Carol tells him, well, you should have thought of that before you turned yourself into a goblin and started killing people. As Carol turns to leave, Norman shouts at her again. And Carol looks at him and taunts him, saying, woo, and slams the door shut. Back in the control room, she begins to go over the current captured villains, each one checked off except for Harry Osborn. A S.H.I.E.L.D. agent says that they keep him elsewhere, and she sits back stating that all of this is insane. They're keeping all of these maniacs in their basement. It's like they're sitting on a nuclear bomb. One of the operators then says that they have a problem. Osborn's cell went dark. She asks, like what? Someone turned off the lights dark? And the operator says no, like all monitor feeds, his vitals, everything. And she says that maybe it's just but before she can even finish her sentence, an explosion goes off in the basement. Moments before the explosion, Norman was sitting in his cell brooding, thinking about how the only difference between him and Nick Fury is that he knows that he's a monster and Nick doesn't. It's fine though, they can take away his money, throw him in jail, drug him, whatever. They can do whatever they want because he wants them to know that everything they have done to him isn't enough to keep him caged. And now, it's his turn to destroy him. As Norman sits, his body begins to smoke and soon it catches fire. The fire spreads and then there's an explosion going off, blowing a massive hole into the side of the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. Norman steps out of his destroyed cell and the blast caused most of the other cells to open and free the criminals, including Gwen Stacy's clone. As Norman gets ready to leave, he hears Otto Octavius telling him, you're looking rather well. Otto takes one of his metal arms, slamming it into Norman, telling him, just so you know, I'm the one who gave you up to the feds. I sold you out the first chance that I got. I even gave them the formula, and they still couldn't figure it out. Norman reaches up, crushing one of the metal arms, and Otto asks, why is that? What was it that they created? With only thinking to himself that Otto is in his way, Norman throws a fireball and jumps at him. Otto then asks, why are you still attacking? Can't you take a moment to marvel at all of what has happened? As Otto knocks Norman back, he tells him, never mind, you can't just keep being you. However, as Otto goes back to taunting Norman, he's suddenly electrocuted and falls to the ground. Electro asks Norman if he can hear him. Also, you're welcome for the save. However, I'm auditioning for some work. I'm gonna need something that pays while I'm on the outside. Norman tells him to find him in a few days. There will be some work. Electro rockets off into the sky, telling him, awesome. I'll see you then. Also, that time that we almost took over the White House, good times. As Norman leaps out of the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, attack helicopters move in to try and take him down, and they manage to shoot Norman back into the water. The pilots report that they have confirmed hits, but once the helicopters get overhead, Norman jumps back out of the water, throwing more fireballs at them. The shields take most of the blast, but Norman jumps over to a helicopter, ripping out one of the men. Then after taking over the controls, he crashes the helicopter into another and rips through the last of them. As he lands, he says that he's going to crucify Fury. I'm gonna crucify him on national television for this. A little while later at Norman's lawyer Joseph's apartment, he gets ready to go out and he sees Norman standing in the mirror fixing his tie. Joseph asks what is he going on about, and Norman tells him that he needs money so that he can put it away for a rainy day. Also, contact a publicist. I'm going to need a booking ASAP. Later, as the news reports on the escape from the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters are televised, the report mentions that they have an exclusive interview with their reporter, Patsy Walker. The camera changes and Patsy says that as of late, the fate of Norman Osborn is a complete mystery until tonight. With her right now is Norman Osborn discussing the recent events that have stopped the course of his life, and how he found himself incarcerated without trial by the same government that he dedicated his life's work to. Norman tells the viewers that he was wrongfully arrested for a crime that they never once told him about. And Nick Fury, he was the one who injected him with the untested chemicals that turned him into a monster. Out in the streets, Peter and Mary Jane go on their date while Peter cares for the school project Parenthood baby. They notice one of the electronic stores playing the news, and on it is Norman's broadcast to the world. Without saying a word, Mary Jane drops her ice cream cone and she begins to run, and Peter catches up with her and she shouts that he's going to come and kill her. He threw her off of a bridge. He knows who they are. Peter grabs her, telling her yes, he knows, but he doesn't want to kill us, he wants to kill me. Peter and Mary Jane rush home, but before they can even get into Peter's house, Mary Jane's mother begins to scream at her that she needs to get into the car. They're leaving right now. Mary Jane says that for once she's right, and Peter tells her to just go, he'll handle it. As Mary Jane drives off, Peter walks into his home to see Aunt May with an older gentleman. The man reaches out, telling Peter hello. His name is Dr. Miles Warren, a friend of his aunt's. Peter says, hi, can I talk to my aunt for just a moment in private? It's kind of really important. And Aunt May pulls Peter aside, saying that this is close to being rude. And without even responding to that, Peter says that Norman escaped and he's on TV telling the world that he's the victim. Aunt May asks if he knows who he is, and Peter says yeah, that's why she needs to leave and get as far away as possible. Go anywhere but here, like a hotel or something. And Aunt May asks what is she supposed to tell Miles, but before Peter can answer, Miles says that he's terribly sorry, but one of his old patients is having an episode. So can they get together another time? She tells him of course that's fine, and Miles says good. Hopefully everything with Peter there works out. I'll be in touch. Once Aunt May leaves, Peter suits up and heads to the only place that he can think of to start looking for clues, Norman's apartment. As he gets in, Peter thinks that surely Norman wouldn't be stupid enough to have returned here. And that's when Peter notices some recently eaten food lying around. Down the hall, a man walks out of the bathroom and Peter stares for a moment and says, "Hey, you're not Osborn." Electro drops his rose and electrifies himself. And Peter shouts, "Far out! It's that naked electric guy!" Electro shouts, "It's Electro!" As bolts of electricity begin to shoot out into the air, Peter dodges, saying that he really doesn't want to know what part of his body that's shooting out of. As Peter jumps through Electro's attack, he says that he's just here to check on Norman. So why is he even here? Electro rides out of the apartment shouting, "Eat me!" And Peter says, "Why are you running?" Peter quickly jumps out after him, and as he catches up, Electro asks, "Will you just insert censored word off?" Peter shouts, "Hey, hey, hey, potty mouth!" As the two begin to fight, Carol and the other S.H.I.E.L.D. soldiers wearing Hulkbuster armor jet down and open fire on Electro. He begins firing bolts of electricity towards the soldiers, but while distracted, Peter whacks Electro with a tire. He then takes the wiring from an electrical pole and he starts wrapping up Electro, asking if this is the part where he, gives up? Carol shouts for the soldiers to open fire and they begin to rain down shots on Electro, and as he falls, Peter says that could have gone better. She then points her gun at Peter, telling him that he has until the count of 3 to get on his knees. He shouts, "No! I want to talk to Nick Fury," and she yells for them to take him down. As the soldiers begin to shoot, one hits Peter in the shoulder, and a little while later, Peter begins to wake back up, finding himself in a S.H.I.E.L.D. cell. Peter calls out, "Hello!" And Carol says that it's a pleasure to meet him without the mask. He shouts, "Why can't I just go one day without someone knowing who I really am?" Carol then starts to shoot webbing from his web shooter and tells him that he should have kept his mask on then. Peter yells out, "Hey, the fluid is expensive, and who are you?" She continues to shoot webs, stating that she is the new Nick Fury. And Peter says, "That's good for you. Can I go now?" And she tells him no, she's playing a game here. One that she didn't invent, but one that she has to play. Meanwhile, back at Joseph's apartment, Norman watches the news as Peter is arrested and he shouts, "That's funny! I escape and they arrest Spider-Man! They even took that electrical idiot off my back!" Joseph tells Norman that really he can't be keeping him here. He needs to go turn himself in. And Norman says, "That's fine. They won't be putting me back in prison. Plus, I still need that money." Joseph says that he isn't helping him, and Norman leans in asking, "Do you mean that you don't have my money?" As Norman grabs him, Joseph tells him that he's making this difficult, and as Norman's eyes light up, he says, "What's going to be difficult here is identifying your body." A short while later, back at the S.H.I.E.L.D. cell, Carol receives a call from Agent Wu saying that he just got on scene where a high-rise apartment is burning. It belonged to a lawyer named Joseph Sinnott, who happened to be Norman Osborn's lawyer. Right now, they have the war room scanning for traces of Norman's powers, so he'll contact them once they receive word. As Carol hangs up, she tells Peter, All right, the game's over. We need to, but before they can finish, Kitty jumps in, phasing through Carol, grabbing Peter's web shooters and mask, stating that these don't belong to them. Peter shouts, "Kitty!" and she says, "What's up?" and then phases the two of them through the ground. Outside on the docks, Peter webs up the guards and tells Kitty that she really needs to stop hitting everyone. But before they can leave, Carol and the other soldiers come out, and they tell her that she would call Xavier, but she's not welcome there anymore, is she? Kitty shouts, "You can't just hold people! You arrested him for no reason! He isn't the bad guy here!" And Carol sighs, "We didn't arrest him. We were placing him in protective custody. There's a maniac on the loose, and I'm just trying to use him as bait," which didn't work. Another soldier walks over to Carol, telling her that they gotta hit a Norman, and Carol tells the teams to move out and hands Peter and Kitty guns. Peter asks what is this for, and Carol says that they're on the team now because who here has experience fighting a goblin? Not S.H.I.E.L.D. Kitty then says that they're minors and they just gave them guns, and Carol tells her that they're not guns, they are neuroneutralizers. They point and shoot, and Norman stops goblining, in theory. Over at Norman's accountant's apartment, he asks where is his money, because he knows what he paid him, and this is kind of too expensive for his pay grade. The accountant says that he got a new job, and Norman slams his fist down asking, "Do I really need to hurt your family to get it out of you?" The accountant tries to say that he doesn't have it, and Norman stops him, changing into the Goblin, telling him, "That would be a yes then." Before Norman can do anything, shots are fired from the window separating the two of them, and Peter swings in, punching Norman, asking if it's really him in there. As Norman is blasted again, Peter tells him he still looks like the Goblin, he's not going down, and Carol says, "Well, he should be down." Peter goes back to beating on Norman, but as Norman grabs Peter, he throws him out of the building. Everyone opens fire again on Norman, and then he too ends up falling out of the building. Peter tries to shoot webbing out to catch himself, but he realizes that he's out since Carol wasted most of it. Kitty jumps out of the building, aiming straight for Peter, but just then, Norman goes crashing into the streets. Peter opens up his eyes, asking, "What's that smell? Am I dead?" And Kitty tells him no, that would be them. They're in the sewer underneath the street. The two phase back up, and as Carol lands, Peter asks, "So, where's Norman?" She tells him that's a good question. Where is he? One of the soldiers says that he fell and bounced, and the others then say that they don't know. Peter looks around and then he jumps down shouting to Carol, "You had him! First you arrested me, dangled me in front of Norman, and I still helped you. Now after all of this, you lose him? And this is because you used up all of my web fluid. I would have been able to avoid this. All of this!" Right now, me and Kitty are going home. We have school in 4 hours, and if you see Norman, give me a call. After getting away, Peter heads home and he looks around thinking about how things have gotten quiet. A little too quiet. And as he goes to get something to eat, he feels his spidey sense going off. When he walks into his living room, he sees Norman sitting there with a sheet wrapped around him, and Peter tells him to get out of there. Norman says so long as he doesn't use his powers, he can't be tracked. And Peter then asks, what does he want? Norman tells him, "I want my life back. I want my money, my son, and I would gladly destroy Nick Fury and anyone else that I can to do it. Right now, you're the only proof left on the planet to show everyone that I am in fact a genius. Proof that I belong in this world." Peter shouts that it was an accident, and Norman says, "So was penicillin." He goes on saying that that is the point. He's buried Nick Fury in the press, so now if Spider-Man would step forward and tell the world that he was created by Norman Osborn, all would be forgiven. Peter shouts, "You're a murderer!" And as the two argue, there's a knock at the door. He looks over and sees a note being slid under it, and as he reads it, it says, "Turn on CNN." Peter grabs the remote to turn on the TV, and on it is Harry Osborn at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, telling everyone that his father is a sick man. He's a liar, and all of the things that he's saying is not true. He killed his mommy. Norman's eyes widen and then light up, and on the screen, Carol looks back at the camera and smiles. Moments pass and Peter starts to wake up, rubbing his head. What happened? I remember Harry on the news and then Norman hitting me. Oh, that's what happened. Over at the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Harry says that he can't believe that he was on CNN. And Carol tells him actually he wasn't. That feed was just sent to a particular TV. They knew his father would be watching. What she needs for him to do now is get away before his father shows up. And no sooner than she says that, than the soldiers begin to report that they have visuals on Norman Osborn. Carol grabs a gun, telling everyone that once he's in range, fire at will. And Norman leaps through the blast, and one manages to hit him and send him into the ocean. The soldiers then ask if they got him, but that's when the platform begins to shift. Everyone looks at Norman and he says that he would like to have a word with his son. Everyone begins to open fire, and then Harry begins to lose control and he changes into a goblin. As the two goblins clash, Norman shouts, "This is the thanks I get. I'm very disappointed in you." But before Norman can continue beating down on Harry, Peter swings in, cracking Norman off of him, and he begins to choke him. Peter says, "Come on, time to go night-night." And then he feels himself starting to burn. He jumps off trying to put himself out since he got lit on fire by the Green Goblin, and then he asks, "How could you do that?" Harry runs in, punching his father down, shouting for him to stop. And as they go back to fighting, the soldiers begin to open fire, blasting Norman away. Peter goes back to check on Harry, and as the soldiers gather around the fire that was Norman, they see him walk out. Norman begins to throw fiery blasts back at the soldiers, and Peter quickly webs up his head to try and blind him so he doesn't know where he's throwing them. As Norman pulls on the web to bring him close, another blast shoots by, throwing people off of him. Harry jumps out, tackling Norman to the ground, telling him to stop, and Norman flips over him, punching him into the ground. As he punches Norman, he shouts, "This is how you honor me, after I've given you everything!" And as Norman punches him, Harry's arm begins to change back into human form. Norman stops and looks down to see his son bloody and lifeless. Norman slowly starts to change back into his human form, and he says, "Please, kill me." Carol tells him gladly, and she fires. Peter pulls himself back up to the platform, and as Norman's body falls to the ground, he runs over, picking up Harry. Carol tells Peter that she's truly sorry, and he runs up, grabbing her, telling her to just stay away from him! You are not Fury, and I don't know you, so from here on out, you better stay the hell away from me. The next day in class, the teacher arrives, saying that she really hopes no one lost their project baby. But before she can start the class, Peter tells everyone that he has something he would like to say. This morning, their friend Harry Osborn died. He knows lately everyone started to forget about him since things went under some kind of bizarre circumstances, but that's fine. He would like to know if they can talk about him for one moment. Harry was a friend to everyone here. They've all known him since kindergarten, and not long ago, he himself, Peter Parker, couldn't walk down the hall without someone doing something stupid to him. But there was one person who stood up for him, and that was Harry. It may not have seemed like it, but to him, Harry was a hero who stood up for people who couldn't defend themselves. And that's what being a hero is, right? Today, they lost one. And that concludes Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 19, The Death of the Goblin. Now we've gone a very long journey on this Ultimate Spider-Man ride, and we have one video left before the inevitable conclusion. The War of the Symbiotes. So make sure that you subscribe to this channel so you can see it next week, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian. I'll see you next time right here.